All right. So I been spending the last few days, because we talked about last time, about action and, you know, actions having mixed results, and so I've been spiraling down that. When should I take action? Should I ever take action? You know, I think I had a pretty lazy um, disposition. I think, I only want to do things if if I usually don't want to do anything, and so I thought a lot about that and just sort of and meditated and did a lot of sitting, and really all I wanted to do is sit. I like desire is not a big thing for me anymore, so I just did a lot of sitting and um, a lot of just pondering and meditating, you know, kind of both. But then, so um, so I had a lot of work to do today, and my kid's been watching too much TV, and he was going crazy, and I was like, this is enough of this. I turned the TV off, and I was like, I'm gonna play with you, and so I started playing with him, and I'm like, what is holding me back from really fully enjoying this? It's like there's just something there hanging on. I'm not fully enjoying this. And and then I started thinking about, when I'm really in the moment, I'm meditating and I'm waiting for those experiences, and I'm really thinking back to that first experience I had that it gave me all that energy. It was just like it blew out my system, and I had all this energy, and I was like, what's holding me back from that? And then it was like nothing. This is nothing. The the really at that point it's the meditator. It's delineating the meditator from the rest of my life. And and then I was like, screw the meditator, bye. And just that simple. And it's like the energy was always there, but I was just holding myself back from it for some reason. And so I don't know. Here's my kid.
Mm-hmm. So,
Yep. Sorry.
he doesn't know about the camera, huh?
No.
Showing the.
Look, Casey. Whoa.
Hi, Papa.
Hey, Papa. Hi, Papa.
All right, bud.
Hello.
All right.
So we were left at that point when you decided that you didn't have to conform to any preconceived ideas about how to behave, and therefore you didn't have anything to stop you from playing with your child and
Yeah,
enjoying.
just completely like it, just like a kid, really thinking about it, you know, and 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 just it's so simple. It was it was so simple. It's just it's not. I don't even, it didn't even, I was waiting for an event, an event to happen, like another one of those events that and then I have the energy and I'm dependent on the event to happen. And but this was like, no, you don't need an event. You don't need a meditator. You don't need to meditate. You just need to be here right now, right now. And then, and, and there's nothing better, you know, on another level. And, but it like in the past when I had the event and I had the energy and I was dependent on the event, this feels like an insight, something that is, once you know it, you can't forget it. It's like, and that energy piece, I feel like was that thing that I wanted, because I've always felt like laziness, like some sort of inherent laziness, and that feeling. I was thinking about it when I was going to work today, that transition from sitting to going to work, and how I didn't dislike that transition, that there was some suffering there. But I like my work. I like doing my work. I never feel bad after my work. So I don't, so I was like, why do I not, what's there that there's what's there that is that's still making me dislike this? And then it's nothing, you know, it's nothing.
You reminded me of something that was, it was kind of an important point in my life, though when I look back upon it, it doesn't seem important at all. But basically, throughout my early working career, I would generally have an anxiety attack on Sunday evening. And when I was in counselor training and group psychotherapy and whatnot, I figured out what it was. And that was that on Sunday evenings when I was in high school, I was in a three-way dilemma every week because I had not done my homework yet. And so here it is Sunday night and I've got homework to do. My favorite TV programs are on TV, and Mom insists that we go to church and that I can figure out a way out of it, which was not going to happen. Okay, so that combination, especially the issue of the anxiety, came from the homework not getting done. And when I put that together and understood that was a habit that had gotten developed because of old behaviors and old circumstances, and those circumstances don't exist anymore. That here I am, I'm out working away from school, no homework, no mommy's telling me I can't watch this or that, and no church to go to. And yet, that old residual anxiety was still there. But when I recognized that as that the anxiety, in fact, was ridiculous, actually, to have those held over feelings. And yet, they were there, noticeable, but undealable. Couldn't deal with, didn't know what to do until through the work that we were doing, I figured out what it was. And so then, finally, I'm giving myself permission to do what I would like to give every meditation student permission to do, is to relax and take a deep breath and forget about the anxiety, because whatever the current new anxiety that people have, it's probably irrelevant to the present moment, that it's something out of the past.
Yeah. For me, I that's like my childhood. I hated school. I hated school, and I was, um, for many reasons. I moved schools when I was in fourth grade, and it was really traumatic. I got off to the wrong foot, right off the bat, and
I know about that. You say it happened in the fourth grade?
yeah, and something happened. It was like the second day of school, and all the boys were like chasing girls, and they were like, "You want to chase these girls?" And so I said, "Okay." I was trying to join the group, and I started chasing them. And there was one girl who was like, I felt really bad. She was like social poison. Everybody hated her for some reason. And somebody saw me chasing her, and they said, "You like so and so," and then uh, that that carried until I was in eighth grade. You know, until it was just the stupidest thing, but and that stigma carried with me, and I just never. And I lived way out in the country, and I didn't have any friends around there, so I was really isolated, and so I had to find my little cocoon out in the country and isolate myself there with TV and computer and and so I would and it's very clear that that's where it came from, and I would you know deeply dread going to school, and it's that same feeling um, when I have a job or something like that. That transition from going to the job, even though my job isn't anything like that.
Oh, that's interesting. Um, you say that this happened to you in the fourth grade, that you changed schools in the fourth grade, and that
Yeah.
was a hard time for you.
Hmm.
Every kid has traumas in school. It's surprising that kids even survive school, but there's a lot of traumas in school, and some of us have more traumas than others. A lot of kids have traumas because the schools themselves are not any good. You and I have the experience of the rural South, but um, most of the kids that go to school are going to really, really bad schools, in bad neighborhoods, uh, racial inequalities, and all kinds of things. The school systems in the United States, um, I think, are intentionally messed up. But I
Yeah.
remember when I was a kid that when you mentioned about moving, did I tell you the story that my dad moved a lot? That when I was 7, my grandfather died. No, when I was 6, my grandfather died. By within 2 years, my mom had convinced my dad to go move out of Oklahoma into North Carolina, which was where her home was, because when my dad died, there was really no family left in Oklahoma. So they moved, and my dad then had trouble getting a job, and when he did, it was a job that moved him from place to place. So I was in Shawnee, Oklahoma until the age of, I was in the third grade. We'll go by grades rather than age. Then at the end of the third grade, going into the fourth grade, we moved to Charlotte. So I was in Rock Hill, South Carolina in the third grade. First 2 grades were in Oklahoma. Then in the fourth and part of the fifth grade in Charlotte, and then my dad got a job, and that job first took him to Fort Mill, South Carolina, which was back across the border, and was in there for half of the fifth grade and the sixth grade. Then to Cheraw, South Carolina, seventh grade, uh, and eighth grade, and then to Abbeville in the 9th and 10th grade, and to Dylan in the 10th or the 11th and 12th grade. So I was in 7 different schools. Now, what that did to my life, basically, I'd been on the road ever since. I could possibly say that this house that I'm in now, I have been in this house longer than any other house that I've ever lived in, except for perhaps the first one, which we lived there until I was about, let's say, close to end of the 7th, not quite 8 years old yet. So I spent about 8 years in that house, and we've been here about 8 years, but I've never spent that long anywhere.
Wow.
But I spent 3-4 years in California, 4 years in Michigan, 4 years in Texas. Been all over the place.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Been in Washington.
Did you get used to it as a kid, or the moving?
Actually, I do remember that when Dad came to announce that we're moving again, that in many cases, that was a relief.
Yeah.
Rather than tearing me away from what was I thought was good. It was that, whatever comes next is not going to be as bad as this hellhole. In fact, the whole family felt that way in Charlotte, South Carolina. My mother couldn't wait to get out of the place.
Yeah.
But in every place that we went, there was racism, there was bigotry, there was fear of outsiders. And so generally the friends that I was able to make were friends that were also new in the vicinity and outsiders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's the way that things had gone that way. But I can't claim that my childhood traumas were any worse than anybody else's childhood traumas, because children go through too much.
Yeah.
And we
It's
carry
traumatic.
too much. It's traumatic. And we carry the baggage.
The school system is set up like, it's like a, it's like a I don't. It's a conveyor belt, and it's there's no attention paid to your feelings or anything that's going on inside. It's like you're packaged up, you're shoved in the school, and you're there until 3 o'clock, and you come out, and that's that. And if you had, some sort of traumatic day and you don't know how to deal with anything socially, yeah, because I really just felt like on my own island, and the friends I was able to make, they were all outsiders, but they were never really felt completely like my friends. I always felt like, people were using me.
Kids who were used to feeling like outsiders, generally, even though they collect together, birds of a feather, but they never quite learn how to make friends because they've never been taught. And so here you have a bunch of educated kids that want to be friends, but they don't really know how, and they're also afraid and protective anyway.
Yeah.
They're afraid of each other. They won't quite let them in.
Yeah, and there's part of me that's always had a distrust, of people, and just feeling like someone was trying to use me, because I think I went through a stage when I got out of high school where I did make a lot of friends, and I was very naive, and I was very outgoing. I mean, I had an outgoing side to me that liked to make people laugh. In certain situations, I could be, the center of attention. But and so when that happens to you and you're sort of the center of attention momentarily, but you can't figure out how to integrate that into your life, it could, you set a standard for yourself that you can't live up to. You set a standard for yourself, and then you don't. Yeah, and there was lots of drugs, and but
well,
anyway,
we all do that. Everyone. Yeah. Here's the thing. The kids go around because it's part of our instinctual nature, wanting to get along, uh, going along to getting along. It's a very natural tendency. And so we tend to then go around picking up rules about how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep getting enough rules about how to do things, we begin to start building a very, very high bar with all of these rules in there. And then naturally, we can't make that high bar that the child himself has created out of all of the rites, rules, rituals, and everything that he's been given. But we somehow construct an even higher bar than is needed or necessary. And so some people will just give up. They'll give up. Some of them will give up in disgust, and others will give up in despair. And that the ones who go into despair then will just be stuck in that system. But the ones who become disgusted wind up being quite rebellious. And we all kind of go through a rebellious state that we want to, we wind up, it looks like that we're rebelling against society and rebelling against Daddy. Because Daddy's just adding a new rule, where in fact what we're rebelling against is the fact that we feel like a failure because we can't meet the standard that we've created with all of the stuff that we've been told to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when we get into that kind of mentality and dialogue as a kid, guess what? Even when the circumstances completely change, like they are for you now things are not like for you, not like anything like they were when you were in school. So why do we have to go around feeling the way we felt in school? The answer is that we need to see that stuff, to wake up to it, and to recognize how inappropriate it is for us to feel the way that we feel when we, in fact, have choice about how we're going to feel.
And part of it is you create the you ignore the problem, or you create you blind yourself to the real problems. I mean, I can see that clearly now, how many times I've just blinded myself because I didn't want to do that English assignment, and I got, or it's not even really the traumatic events. I remember the traumatic events clearly, but it's the all of the mentality that led to the traumatic events that you block out, or
It's almost like that as we forget things, the thing that we wind up having the deepest in the memory is the stuff that impacted us most, which was our own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though we no longer remember the situation, or we remember it vaguely, we do remember how we felt in that situation. And so we use that feeling as an example, go around feeling that same way in different situations.
It's like you wrap the memory. You wrap the memory in an emotion until you can't see the memory anymore, and
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Unless you do the research and you can sit down and think about it and can come up with this kind of psychological archaeology, especially when the mind is really clean. However, the good news is that we don't even have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact we can just begin to wake up to how we feel, knowing that it didn't matter how we got into the habit of feeling this way. We don't have to go back and do that archaeology. We can just deal with that feeling as it is right now and recognize I don't have to feel like this. I can feel like, in your case, playing with the kid right now. Let's go. Let's stop being uh, doing what we used to do and feeling what we used to do. Let's go ahead and enjoy the moment.
Yeah, and it turned that corner where used to there would be an event, and then I start cognizing the event, and then I can't stop, and then that becomes a sort of an obsessive thing of the meditator, where he's trying to, or I'm trying to, um, I don't know, make myself feel better about whatever event. Oh, I must be at this level, or I must be whatever the meditator is thinking about whatever just happened, and that becomes this obsessive thing that this is just a reflection. Like, I can immediately see it's a reflection. It's like it's an immediate reflection in the moment when something happens. There's an immediate reflection, and that it refracts, and you don't have to pay attention to the refraction. It
Right.
just, the moment is here. That's the pure thing. That's the light, and then the refraction is just happening. And it's not really worth paying attention to, unless you know unless you need to. I mean,
The
yeah.
way that I understand the words that you're using, I would rephrase that into the situation of that we can basically see what's going on now without having to respond or react to that the way that we used to feel.
Yeah.
That we can actually respond to the situation that we're having right now with the situation that we're having right now and have the feelings associated with the situation we're having right now rather than the feelings that we're carrying from the past. And that can be seen on a momentary basis really easily. If um, if two people are having an argument and one of them leaves that argument, he's still pissed off and he's going to give that argument or that anger to the next person he meets. Instead of meeting that person in the here now and be happy to see them, he's carrying over the anger that he had 3, 4, 5, 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about letting go, that's basically what the real letting go is all about. The letting go is to let go of feelings from the past, whether that past was 10 minutes or 10 years.
Or 30 seconds.
Or 30 seconds if you're smart. Exactly right. And things do happen pretty fast. In fact, 30 seconds in a meditator's time is a long time. There's a whole lot of stuff happening going on in 30 seconds. Well, that's time for at least a full breath or two.
I think, and I when I started getting into when I started getting interested in doing meditation, I would read so many things of monks saying, like, oh, lay people can't, they can't do, but, I'm not saying, being a monk is a special position, Um, but it almost made it seem like an impossible task for someone with two kids. Like you're never going to be able to find enough clarity to if you have this busy life. But I feel like you can leverage it
I
if you
don't
really
think
embrace
that
it.
the wise people say that kind of thing,
Yeah.
which means that I don't think that you're going to hear that from an old wise monk.
Okay.
Who you will hear that from is your standard, ordinary, read a book or two on the Dhamma kind of opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of people out there with very little Dhamma and a whole lots of opinions about it.
Yeah.
And so there's basically a certain amount of research that needs to be done. Some people will read a book and like that book and then like the author, and so they get, let us say, attuned to that author, and they read and read and read that author. An example would be Thich Nhat Hanh, or in any group. Jack Kornfield would be another. People really like Jack's books. And so the point that I'm making, though, is that, first off, no one has just one teacher. We all have had many, many teachers. You probably had more formal teachers than you can even remember their names.
Yeah.
And when you're in high school, you have 3 or 4 or 5 teachers every year. When you're in college, you may have 3 or 4 or 5 teachers every semester. And so now look at all the number of actual formal teachers that we've had. But somehow in the religious world, there's like so few teachers around. Like when you go to the church, the preacher is the only teacher there. Everybody else is Sunday school teachers, but no, they're not really teachers. They're so we get this kind of guru mentality going of who's my guru. But really, every student should have quite a lot of sources. Now, the next point that I would point in that direction is looking for unity among all of this diversity that I'm recommending, in the sense that on the internet, you will find a lot of different people saying a lot of different things about the teachings of the Buddha. And that people will then get into arguments about that, where none of them are going to go take the time that it takes to do a really good literature research about it. And one of the, on some Reddit or another I've seen recently, or heard about actually, an argument over gladdening the mind as being too much work. And yet, if any of them had gone and actually read the sutras and figured out what teachers are teaching it and what it's all about, there wouldn't be any argument at all. Everybody would just agree, yes, gladdening of the mind is a very useful thing to do. But instead, there's a lot of argumentation about it with no one having any good results and everyone keeping their own opinion. Now, that's just one example, and I can think of probably 100 different examples of that in the teachings of the Buddha. So that, we're really, really lucky now. 30 years ago and before, we did not have good translation. We did not have the internet. We did not have a lot of the resources that are available to students now. The only way that you had of getting close to a new teacher was on a bus or on foot. And so, yeah, we've traveled around. I've been all over Asia looking for various Asian teachers. And I settled on Bhikkhu Buddhadasa because I could tell, because of all of the other stuff that I had put together, that I have finally come to something that is worthwhile staying with. And this is something that I recommend to all of the students to look around, get familiar with a lot of different things so you can begin to understand deeply what the Buddha was getting at, so that each student can come to develop their own practice, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that what the real job is, what the real skills are that are needed, and including this point about understanding our feelings well enough to know that we do not have to live according to the feelings that we're used to having out of habits from the past. But in fact, we can change the way we feel.
Yeah.
And when I say that, almost everybody says, "Wait a minute, that's hard to do." Well, it is if you don't have the skill.
Right.
We have to develop. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that what for me was best about your approach is that there were a lot of people I was listening to who were talking about philosophy, essentially. You know, it was philosophy, and it was adding concepts, and the concepts were intriguing, very intriguing, and that's what really got my attention. Like, because I had been doing meditation, and then I heard some things from some people that really got me interested about non-duality, and then. But then your approach, you don't get into conceptual anything. You're just fully practice based, and you never gave me that. Where when I came in as a student at the beginning, I wanted that. I wanted something conceptual. I wanted you to give me something conceptual, but it's like you I don't know if you know that you're doing it or not, or if that's just this style, but you just gave me practice, which is what I needed, not what I wanted.
I find that interesting and amusing because I don't, though I try to find out what a student needs and give them that, and I don't really tend to keep track of it. But I will say that I have recently seen a post in Reddit from one of the students who was telling another student on Reddit that Dhammarato is not giving him enough practice stuff. Go figure.
Well, we can talk around things and all of this, but we're talking about gladdening the mind and very simple things. But as far as, let's say, like other practices like Dzogchen or something like that, where there's a lot of discussion about philosophy, of metaphysics, and all of this, that's very interesting. But for me, that's an interesting hook. But I don't. It wasn't going to get me there. It wasn't going to get me to gladdening the mind, but it did very much interest me. But then
I understand what you're saying, right.
You just said follow the breath, and that's what I needed to hear.
Okay, so let's look at it from this perspective then. What I have the intention of teaching is